Afternoon, everybody. I welcome you all. I welcome you all on behalf of the Department of English, National College, Trichy. We continue with our Wednesday lecture series, and today the lecture will be on literature and environment, or literature and eco theory. For a long time, eco-criticism has been here in this country. I remember way back in the year 2004 when we conducted a national seminar on eco-criticism at Bharatidasan University, Trichy. It was the first of its kind in Tamil Nadu. Dr. Noel Joseph Irderad, the then head of the Department of English, he organized this program. And since then, many seminars have been organized on this topic because it proves to be contemporary. I start with a small story. There was this man, his name was Thomas Midgley Jr. He was an engineer by profession. He lived in Dayton, Ohio, in the state of America. Now, he was an engineer, but he should have stopped at that. But it was the 1920s, and the motor cars were on the road. And all these motor cars or automobiles, they suffered from something called juddering, or the knocking of petrol. So, in order to bring down the juddering effect made possible by unleaded petrol, he started making use of lead, which is commonly known as tetraethyl lead. Since then, there was zero pollution of lead. And when they started using lead on a large scale, or tetraethyl lead on a large scale, the juddering stopped, but lead pollution came into the world. They started using lead even on food packets and even on water containers lined with lead or tetraethyl lead. And finally, in the 1990s, I think it was somewhere around 1998, they started supplying unleaded petrol. For 75 years or so, the damage went on. Lead pollution came into the world. The very same man, that is Thomas Midgley Jr. Now, Thomas Midgley Jr., he made use of another very important pollutant, that was freon. So, freon, we all know, which was a chlorofluorocarbon, and that same freon was responsible for what we call the depletion of ozone layer. So you understand how pollution came into the world. One man was responsible for two great pollutants. One was tetraethyl lead, and the other one was what we call chlorofluorocarbon. Of course, he died a sad death. He suffered from polio, and he invented a contraption to help him and to feed him, to massage him, and so on. One day, that very same machine which helped him strangled him to death. He was caught in the wire and he was strangled to death. And ever since technology came into this world, We suffer from the after effects of technology. In 1945, in the year 1945, when atom bombs were dropped on these two cities, namely Nagasaki and Hiroshima, the superpower, namely America, demonstrated to the world the technology it was available with itself. But the bomb flattened out the two cities and also killed thousands and thousands of people. Now today, we all live in mortal fear of a nuclear flare-up. And this is the world in which we live. Now, modernism has ushered in technology, but also it has promoted what we call exploitation of natural resources. We'll look into all these things in detail, but remember, when we use the word environment, we are placing the human being at the center, and we try to surround. Enviro means surround. So we think of all other beings, we think of all other things outside of us as surrounding us. But when we use the term ego, we are talking about different systems, and it may be an ecosystem and it may be something. We are talking about different systems. For example, we are trying to separate human culture from nature, and we talk about the human culture as distinct from that of an animal culture, as that of the culture of the avians or birds. So we distinguish each. Now, when we use the word ecology, we try to take into account all those organizations of what we call the major living and non-living components of this world. Okay. Now, for a very long time, we have been talking about things like deforestation, for instance. Then we talk about acid rain. Now, at one point in the 1970s, acid rain became a major issue. Then large-scale whaling, for instance, in the Pacific and elsewhere. So, and species extinction, we talked about. For example, a bird like dodo, which got extinct, and many other species, they slowly became extinct. So, we talked about species extinction. Then, we went on to discuss the loss of what we call water table, or depletion of water table, or the aquifers, depletion of aquifers. Likewise, we were discussing many issues related to the world in which we live in. Now, recently, we have started discussing climate change. Of course, you know, this environment impact assessment 2020 was published by our central government, and it has come under criticism, and people have different opinions on this green draft. You have to go and read it to find out what is this environment impact assessment about our own country. So there were many agencies worldwide which came forward to publish the state the moribund planet finds itself today. So in the United States, they have something called Environment Protection Agency. Now, today we talk about Intergovernment Panel on Climate Change. This is an UN-based organization, we know, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So they make their own assessment, they publish their issues. Some of them have impact on a global level. then certain things have impact on the local level. So, for a very long time, we have been discussing issues right from pollution to climate change. Today, we discuss mostly carbon footprints that we all leave behind. We discuss something like carbon sequestration or carbon absorption because both carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide, they are released into the atmosphere in tons. So as a result, it affects and it affects all living organisms in this world. So we are talking about carbon sequestration and so on. So I will discuss all this in due course. But where does literature figure in? After all, we are all trapped in this planet Earth, and literature has become what we call sensitized to these issues, especially this what we call environmental problems. Now, this consciousness of environmental problems has permeated literary imagination. And today, we know literature cannot remain quiet or indifferent to the events happening around us. So, now, as a result, what happened? We have to um, right. So, hope my screen is visible. Right. So, and today we have reached a stage where, as Stephen Jay Gould says, we cannot win the battle to save species and environments without forging an emotional bond between ourselves and nature. Now, remember Stephen Jay Gould was a Harvard University professor, right? He was a staunch naturalist and an environmentalist. And he says, as human beings, in order to save these species and environments, we have to forge an emotional bond between ourselves and nature. Now, I want this as a starting point. And literature precisely does this. It helps us to forge an emotional bond between the humans and nature. And literature plays a pivotal role. We'll talk about the writers and others who have contributed immensely to forge this bond between the humans and nature, or in other words, between culture and nature. The term eco-criticism, it was probably coined by William Rookett, and it appeared in his essay, Literature and Ecology, an Experiment in Eco-Criticism. And remember, William Rookett defined eco-criticism as the application of ecology and ecological concepts to the study of literature. So we'll see what these ecological concepts are. Over a period of time, people from different branches like anthropology, even from psychology and from philosophy, they have contributed much to eco-critical study, and these eco-critical concepts have been steadily applied to literature. And Rookett claims that literature functions in the biosphere. So biosphere is where we all human beings live with other beings, non-human beings, and with them it constitutes the biosphere. Now, Cheryl Gladfelty and you should know something about her. She and Harold Fromm, they brought out an eco-criticism reader. And she too offers her definition of eco-criticism. She says she treats eco-criticism as the study of the relationship between literature and the physical environment, taking an earth-centered approach to literary studies. Earth-centered approach. It is not a human-centered approach. Mark her words. She's very clear. She says it is an earth-centered approach to literary studies. Lawrence Buell, another eco-critic, he has this to say, and he asserts that eco-criticism is a multiform inquiry. And what it inquires about? It inquires about the relationship between literature and environment conducted in a spirit of commitment to environmental praxis. That is, action, environmental action. That is, it is not purely theory. You have to get into action. Say, the feminists have this to say that for a long time, the feminists, they had the same thing. Feminist theory was one, and social activism was another. And Lawrence Buell backs for environmental activism. It is not that you write a piece of literature which talks about, of course, you write it imaginatively, using your imagination, and fictionally you acknowledge or you document environmental crisis, so be it, fair enough. It's only a fiction, but it cannot be removed from environmental praxis. This is according to Lawrence Buell. And this was the first major movement. It was called Earth First. It is a radical and a revolutionary environmental movement that emerged first in the USA in the 1980s. And all these revolutionaries, they were inspired by Rachel Carson's Silent Spring. Now, you have to remember this seminal work on environment. Rachel Carson, when she wrote her Silent Spring, she was trying to focus our attention on the ill effects of the spraying of DDT, a chemical, dichloro, diphenyl, trichloroethane. Dichloro, diphenyl, trichloroethane. Spraying of DDT to a greater extent killed the swamp mosquitoes. And as a result, malarial spread was stopped. But DDT did not die. The mosquitoes died for sure. Now, when it was sprayed upstream near a river, it went and killed deer, some 200 kilometers downstream. And such was the effect of this chemical. So for the first time, she brought into the focus that spraying of chemicals, of course, it kills these microorganisms, but it also kills animals like deer. So, and it pollutes the river water. Now today, we talk about fish dying mysteriously in a river, or fish dying mysteriously and floating on the oceans. We have no clue why it happens, but we realize the fact that chemicals and plastic that float on rivers or that are washed away into the sea, they kill these ocean resources. And we know the oxygen supply is cut off, and all these marine creatures and riverine creatures, they die of lack of oxygen, which we simply call biological oxygen demand, or BOD. Okay, now come back. All the Leopold, his concept of land ethic, and Edward Abbas, the Monkey Wrench Gang, these were the books that inspired environmental movement across the globe. And Greenpeace movement was one of those important organizations which for a very long time kept its fight. For instance, Greenpeace movement, they tried to stop nuclear testing. The Americans started testing their nuclear arms in a place called Bikini Atoll in the Pacific Islands. The French also did the same. The Greenpeace movement, they were in the forefront to stop this testing of nuclear weapons in the sea, and it killed the marine organisms. It killed tons and tons of fish, and again it polluted the water. So a movement like Greenpeace movement, it was also in the forefront of stopping large-scale culling of whales. Okay, now this person, his name was Dave Foreman. He set aside millions of acres of land as ecological preserves all across the United States. Today, if you go to the United States and if you look at the forests, they are neat and clean forests. All the trees are neatly lined up. You don't find a mix of trees and shrubs and other things. The forests are even neat because they planted millions and millions of trees. Recently, governments have decided to plant 1 trillion trees across the globe. Okay, so we'll see that. Now, there was certainly a shift, and there was this shift from ego consciousness, that was a human being who was fully conscious of himself and his world and his life, to something called eco consciousness. When people started discussing environment in the academia, and that too in the Department of English and in the Department of Environmental Studies, the aim was to raise human consciousness. So if you raise human consciousness towards ecology, the belief is one day it will become what we call eco-conscience. See, we all have moral conscience. We have imbibed this ethical conscience or moral conscience, and we know, and we have developed a sense of right and wrong. Our conscience dictates us to behave in a certain fashion. It tells us this is right or this is wrong. So the belief is eco-consciousness will lead to eco-conscience. Right. Now, look at this difference between ecocentrism and biocentrism. When we talk of ecocentrism in our discussions or deliberations related to literature and ecology, or literature and eco-theory, we have to bear this in our mind. In literary criticism, eco-criticism is a mode of analysis of literary texts using eco-centric principles and values. This is related to our reading of a text, and we call for our support eco-critical principles and values while we examine a text or while we offer a critique of the text. So, textual interpretations are made on the basis of concepts like environmental ethics, land health, ecological harmony, and so on. So, this is purely ecocentrism. Now, what is biocentrism? My aim in this lecture is to make you aware of certain terminologies related to literature and environment, or literature and eco theory, so that you become familiar with these concepts. Now, what is biocentrism? This is a concept drawn from Donald Worster's seminal work, Nature's Economy, A History of Ecological Ideas. This was published in the year 1994. So, biocentrism is a notion that all life, or even the entire universe, the whole of the universe, is taken as a single entity, as a whole, and that is equally valuable, and humanity is not the center of their existence. See, in other studies, humanity, or what we call anthropocentric studies, we place ourselves in the center. But here, biocentrism, it talks of the entire universe and it doesn't discuss humans alone. There are other non-human things which also demand equal attention. Later, when people talk about biospheric egalitarianism, see, this biocentrism is directly related to biospheric egalitarianism. Now, what is this biospheric egalitarianism? Egalitarianism, as we understand, which treats all things as equal. Now, it doesn't stop with treating only humans, all humans as equals, even all living organisms and non-living organisms as equal. Even the rivers, the mountains, the soil, they also are treated as important as human beings. Okay, so did such a thought exist in our country? Yes. If you go and look at Tamil literature, and I want to jog your memory to the earliest Tamil literature, Tolkappiyam, which talks about the Thinai concept. 5 great Thinai. I'll explain. One is, this is the most ancient eco-critical theory in India. The ancient Tamils, they conceived of 4 basic natural regions. The mountain slope, that is the geography of the mountain, which they call Kurinji. Then the scrub land, that is the forest area or the jungle, the scrub land, which they call the Mullai. Then the riverine plain, right? The riverine plain where we grow our rice today and where we grow our cereals today, that is the plain, which they call Maruda. And the coastal region or the sea coast, they call Neidal. Then Tolkappiyam says any of this landscape will face desertification, which will become a desert, either because of human exploitation of natural resource or because of famine and drought. They will turn into a desert region, which they call Palai. Palai is desert, right? So now Tolkappiyam clearly says this Palai, it says Naduvanadu. Naduvanadu means common to all, common to any of this. So each of these regions, they supported communities of human and non-human beings and their lifestyles. For instance, Mullai, it has its own god. For instance, the Tamil god, Lord Muruga, it belongs to this particular one, right, Mullai, and he also belongs to hilly terrain, Kurunji, and also he belongs to Marudam and Neidam. You look at the temples in Tamil Nadu for Lord Muruga, they are erected in all these lands. Now, the god is common to all, but there are other deities and tonic deities whom we call Sirukadavur. Each land has its own gods or deities. People have their own occupation or vocation. They have their own food habits. They have their own dwelling places which are typical of that land and so on. So then the Dept concept progresses to say that there is a triadic ontic nexus consisting of the primary, say, which is known as Mudal in Tamil, that is the first one, the primary. Then the embryonic, that is what we call Karu. Then the third one is what we call appropriate elements or Uripurul. So this triadic concept of life and place and time, they constitute the primary element. Say, place plays an important role in our reading and understanding of a theory like eco-theory, right, or eco-criticism. It plays a very important role where it happens and when it happens. Then the natural cultural features of the region, what we simply call that the cultural geography of that region, is very important. See, look at our own nation. The cultural geography of Canada is different from the cultural geography of Assam. The cultural geography of Tamil Nadu is certainly different from the cultural geography of the Leh region or Kashmir. But we form a great nation. But when you read this, you have to take into account the natural cultural features of the region, and they constitute the embryonic element or Karu. Karu means the center, the something that holds everything. That is, it's almost like a womb. It is Karu, right? And then the characteristic and thematic action determines its appropriate element. What brings that essence to that particular place or to that particular time or to that particular geographical region, that is called Uripurul in Tamil. Okay, so this is one of the ancient eco-critical theory. Now, I want to focus our attention on some of those ideas that have been proposed by people. For instance, Iris Murdoch, in her work, Metaphysics as a Guide to Morals. This she wrote in the year 1992, in which she suggests that the humans develop a reverent sympathy, mark her words, and you need to sympathize. Okay, say, for instance, we kill snakes. The very sight of snakes instills fear in our heart. Our first reaction is to kill a snake. Do you remember that poem by D.H. Lawrence, where he claims that education in him, right? Education in him goaded him to take a club and to kill the snake. Of course, the snake escapes, but he regrets later because there is a lack of reverent sympathy. Say, I visited Australia a couple of years ago, and I was traveling in certain places infested with snakes. But I saw both, warning about the presence of snakes and also telling us snakes are our friends. Don't try to kill them. Snakes are our friends. They have kept all these boats, every 100 meters. So, what do you tell them? You need to develop a reverent sympathy. I'm talking about the deadliest of all terrestrial creatures, namely snake. Now, if we have to develop a reverent sympathy towards a deadliest creature, how important it's for us to develop a reverent sympathy to other animals, birds, right, and other creatures of this world. Say, did such a practice exist in India? Yes, it did exist. The Jains, for instance, okay, and especially the Jain monks and others, even in those days, they used to wear a facial mask. they simply called it Muhavastrika, right? They covered their faces because they didn't want to even uh, kill those microorganisms by sucking them into their mouth. They always kept a small broom as they walked on the streets. They even swept the floor or the earth with the broom and they walk so that even by accident they should not even step on a small ant or a small organism. Now that is a reverent sympathy, right? A kind of an altruism, so to speak. And this entails a tender and respectful interest in the diversity of the world. According to Iris Mardow, she says this brings within us a kind of a spiritual transformation or conversion, which she calls metanoia. I like her concept, especially this concept of metanoia. To achieve this, morally disciplined attention and serious contemplative perception are required. It is not just you are attracted by nature, but a morally disciplined attention. Say, for instance, our Prime Minister launched this Swachh Bharat movement. But how many of us took this Swachh Bharat movement seriously? How many of us took to saying no to plastic and plastic of low microns, which can be very polluting? How many of us have stopped using low quality plastic? It requires a disciplined attention and serious contemplative perception, how we contribute to pollution, how we contribute to the carbon footprint. We have to contemplate it, think about it, and it requires a constant consciousness. So, a consciousness, we have to be alive to this world. When one becomes aware of the living environment, that's what she says. We have to be alive to the world outside of us. Then metanoia takes place. This is Iris Mardow. Right. Then there was this person, his name was Joseph W. Meeker. He introduced the term literary ecology. And many people are fond of this term, literary ecology. Ecology as such, it refers to anything, the ecology of our college, we say, the ecology of our machines, the ecology of something, that is a study of something and its environment. So now according to Joseph W. Meeker, ecology refers to, literary ecology refers to the study of biological themes and relationships which appear in literary works. And again, he proceeds to say, it is simultaneously an attempt to discover what roles have been played by literature in the ecology of the human species. Literature plays a crucial role in the ecology of our human species. Without literature, I think we humans would not have become refined. We would not have become sophisticated. We would not have developed a sensibility. And we would not have developed an aesthetic sense. See, literature played a very crucial role, a very important role. And he says it's simultaneously, it's a study of biological themes and what role literature plays in the ecology of the human species. Meeker, he insists on the relationship between literary form and the form and structure of nature. Saying the nature itself has a structure. Okay, we need to understand. We are not talking about a structuralist approach towards literary theory or eco theory, but he says the universe has a structure, the world has a structure, they all have a system, they all come under a system, right? Say, we talk about the solar system, and similarly, the flora and the fauna, they have a system. And people talked about the great chain of being. We talk about a food chain. That is a system. So there are many things which we can call a system. So now, or a structure. What he says, the reconciliation between literary form and the form of structure of nature as outlined by ecological scientists, because literary form and the form of nature resemble an ecosystem and convey an intuitive experience. Now, I belong to the human system. Now, how do I understand the another system? Let us say the lives of elephants, for instance. How do I understand? How can I understand? Only through an intuitive experience. I don't have a scientific data to compare. Rather, through an intuitive experience. Say, today we humans know that the elephants also display emotions almost similar to that of humans. They are all social beings. They all live together. They have families, and they take care of their the siblings, the younger ones, the cohorts. Then they all display the same emotions when there is a loss, when there is a death. Like we humans gather and we mourn the death of someone. These elephants also gather, they mourn the death of their own kind. We know all that, but how do we understand? Through an intuitive experience. Similarly, we humans also try to understand the change in weather, the change, or whether it is going to rain. You ask our farmer, he would tell you by just taking a good look at the clouds, whether it would rain or not, whether they are rain-bearing clouds or not, how much it will rain. And they can even predict in another 10 minutes it will rain, or in another half an hour it will rain. Or they may even tell you, these clouds are passing clouds, it will not rain. So now, this intuitive experience, intuition is very important to understand nature, which is a different system altogether. This is according to Joseph W. Meeker. Now, this takes us to something called literary forms. Now, literary forms, we can divide into two groups. One is nature writing, the other one is eco-critical writing. Nature writing is entirely different from eco-critical writing. Now, nature writing, we celebrate nature, we romanticize nature, we treat nature as a rational being. Sometimes we try to equalize nature with God, and we celebrate nature. Now, what is eco-critical writing? It is different. We offer a critique of what we humans made of nature. Say, there was this famous quip, what man has made of man, but what humans have made of nature. That is the big question for eco-critical reading. So in the past, we had such writings available. For instance, Virgil's Eclogue was a great pastoral. And following Virgil's Eclogues, Edmund Spenser wrote his Shepherd's Calendar, which was also a pastoral. And Philip Sidney's Arcadia, that was a pastoral. And Shakespeare's As You Like It, it's a pastoral play, which happens in the Arden forest. They all have the forest as the setting. See, we have a lot of pastoral poems. Even elegy written in a country churchyard is regarded as a pastoral elegy. So it all talks about the oneness, almost the primitive spirit or the primordial spirit that is in human, that is in nature. Nature itself is inspirited with this primordial feelings. So maybe the Christians would say it's almost like Edenic purity. Before the fall, the pre-lapsarian state, before the fall of human beings. Now, that was the pastoral poetry. Another name for pastoral poetry was bucolic poetry. Uh, they focused on the shepherds and the rural life and their verses. Now today, when we use the term bucolic poetry, it encompasses all those poems that romantically describe rural life. What these poems do, they rhapsodize nature, they romanticize nature. On the other hand, Georgics. This is another form of poem. Virgil wrote Georgics, but many of you may remember Robert Frost, Mending Wall, and After Apple Picking. Now, what is Georgic? George means earth, right? Earth, something related to earth, or simply earth. Say, in poems like Mending Wall and After Apple Picking, there is a large-scale human intervention in nature. Good enough. At the same time, this is all about our farm activity, right? When we say a farm activity, it is almost about our backyard. In poems, what we call Georgics, you will come across a vivid description of the farmyard, the backyard of a home, where you have these draft animals, where you have bundles of hay, where you have your own small garden, or patches of cabbage, or where you find your own hearts are tethered, or you find your own chicken coop. Now, it's all about your backyard, but still connected to nature. Such poems are called Georgics. But there is something called bioregional narrative. Now, what is a bioregion? So, when you talk of a biosphere or a bioregion, right, it is something similar to the Tinai, right? A particular region that is known for its climate, it is known for its land, it is known for its people. Now, that is called a bioregion. See, many of us here in down south, we live closer to the equator. See, and for us, the days and nights are equal. So we are conscious of that. Sometimes we have this 12-hour fine, day and night. But you move towards north, right? You move towards a city like Delhi, right? Especially in summer, the sun sets up only around 7:30, and you find it was glowing till 8 o'clock in the evening. But here down here in Trichy, right, the sun disappears, and by 7 o'clock it is dark, right? Then you go to the mountainous regions. Even here in Tamil Nadu, you go to a region like Ooty, the temperature is different, the climatic condition is different. Or you go to Kanyakumari, again it is different. Or you go to the extreme northern part of Tamil Nadu, which is part of the Deccan Plateau, right? The last part, the last edge of Deccan Plateau. I'm talking about a town like Huzur, right? Which is nearly 1,030 meters above the sea level, right? It's a plateau region. So a bioregion, it has its own unique flora and fauna and people. So now the regional novels are about such people, right? For instance, Jim Cheney, his term for a narrative that is localized and particularized. And in Thomas Hardy's novels, it is his imaginary creation, Wessex. In William Faulkner's, it is Yeknapatawaka County. And in Mark Twain, it is the Mississippi Delta. They receive focus attention in terms of minute details. And Carol Bigwood, she notes that a bioregional narrative relinquishes the supposed timeless authority for the sake of the gifts of localities and particularities. When we talk of a piece of literature, we talk of its universal appeal, its timeless appeal, Whereas a bioregional narrative is very specific to the place, that is the locality, and the particularities are related to that place. For instance, you read D.H. Lawrence novels, they are all about the miners of a particular, especially Nottinghamshire and those places in the United Kingdom. Or you read Arnold Bennett's Anna of the Five Towns. It is all about the potters and people, right? About that localities, right? So you read the Thomas Hardy's novels and others' work, right? So they are termed bioregional narrative. Then come another kind of literature. Of late, we talk about literature that talk of what we call a post-natural world. The natural world has disappeared. The industrial world has powerfully intervened and altered the natural world. For instance, if you read those pylon poets who lived during the beginning of 20th century, they talk about the pylons, that is, these huge posts which carry heavy-duty electricity from one place to another, and also the skyscrapers, the urban skyscrapers. So they were called pylon poets. They were taught in that poem, the discussion was on this changing world, the changing landscape. Now today, our landscape has, or even our seascape or skyscape, they have completely changed. And nature no longer resembles nature in its pristine beauty. So we talk of a post-natural world, and in this post-natural world, many of these works, especially literary pieces, they display what is called toxic consciousness. Now, toxic consciousness in literature is something very, very significant. Now, what is this toxic consciousness? Say, this term has been coined by Cynthia Daytering. Of course, I haven't given the name here. Her name is Cynthia Daytering. Cynthia, Cynthia Daytering, Deitering. She calls toxic consciousness. And today, we find this toxic consciousness in most of the novels. Now, look at this novel written by Indra Singha. He lives in the United Kingdom. And this particular work, Animals People, it is based on the Bhopal disaster, right? Say, in the city of Bhopal in the year 1984, there was this leak. So there was this Union Carbide factory, and out of that factory leaked this deadly methyl isocyanide. It killed more than 22,000 people and rendered the landscape absolutely polluted, and still people live there. And for so many years, most of the people were not paid any reparation. They were not paid any reparation. Many of them had died. Recently, I read, at least 3 weeks ago, those people who had suffered the impact of Bhopal gas leak, they had all passed away because of COVID-19. Because their body had lost their immune system. Whereas in other parts of India, somehow or other, people put up a strong fight and they survived, but not in Bhopal. Very, very tragic. So now, in Indra Singha's Animals People, go and read. It's a beautiful novel. And please read another novel by Don DeLillo. Don DeLillo's White Noise. Now, this is also a very significant work, a very powerful work. This is about a small town called Blacksmith, and there, through the city passes a railway wagon filled with chemicals. And what happens? right? There is a gas leak, which they call airborne toxic event. Airborne toxic event because the chemical fills the air, and the writer very sarcastically he puts that the city or the town thereafter had very beautiful sunsets, meaning what? It had altered the atmosphere of that town. And because of the chemical joining the atmosphere, the town of Blacksmith had all those uh, interesting colors up in the sky, and they had this sunset. Okay, so this also reminds us of where we live. Remember, a couple of months ago in Vishakhapatnam, there was this gas leak. When I saw that footage, it broke my heart. How people came and they just collapsed on the road. The same thing happened in Bhopal. How many of you know in 1984, almost everyone in Bhopal railway station perished, and including the station master and every other employee, and even a train, a passenger train that was parked there, and all the passengers in that train, they also died, right? So it cuts off the oxygen supply and people die. So we all live in a risk society. We live in a risk scale. This is a term coined by Susan Cutter, and it was later used by Ulrich Beck to describe landscapes at risk to acute airborne toxics. Many of our urban landscapes are at risk. All our major cities are at risk to acute airborne toxics. Remember what happened in Beirut? And there was this huge explosion. You talk about ammonium nitrate. And they had an equal amount stored in Chennai port, which they removed, with such speed. Okay, so now in this post-natural world, you come across what we call brownfield as opposed to greenfield. Now, what are these concepts of brownfield and greenfield? See, brownfield is anthropogenetically degraded landscape. Now, what is anthropogenetically degraded landscape? Because of human activity, because of human presence. Say, all you need to do is to take a visit to our shanty towns. Now, the shanty towns in Mumbai, the shanty towns in Chennai. So, now because of human activity and because of the gutter that runs through the street and the gutter that seeps into the ground, what happens? You have created a brown field. All that soapy water and all the chemicals that we use to clean our homes, they are all washed out and they seep into the land. And we don't have any effluent treatment plant to treat the gutter that flows into the sea. Say, if you take a look at Chennai Marina, if you take an aerial look, the water looks brackish, at least for the next, they say, 10 nautical miles. The water looks brackish. It doesn't look green or blue. Why? We allow untreated water to flow into the sea, untreated gutter to flow into the sea. Right? Brownfield is degraded land as opposed to greenfield. Now, greenfield are affluent suburban localities where you would find nice parks, you would find a small wooded area, you would find landscaping done beautifully. Now, they are there within the same city. So they talk about this brownfield, which living in that brownfield itself is dangerous. It is a risk scale. Okay, so I'm just focusing your attention on a few things so that when you read many of these literary pieces, you can take an eco-critical look. Now, I like John Ruskin and his foxglove principle. Now, what is this foxglove principle? Can we have a world where everything is perfect? Can we have a world without any imperfection? Can we have a world without pollution? Can we have a world which is uh, pristine in the sense of Edenic beauty? No. He says, an industrial, um, uh, he says, the industrial mass production has destroyed human sensibility and humans' harmonious relationship with nature. According to him, an industrial society demands engine-turned precision. See, even when I started the program, 3 o'clock on the dot, you start the program. So 3 o'clock sharp, you start the program. Why? Because this is engine-turned precision. See? Now, he says this goes against the principle of natural world, of which the humans are part. Say, I have been to these Western countries, right? So, when you look at when you wait in the railway station, 3 o'clock means 3 o'clock, that the metro train arrives on the platform. 3:02, it's a departure. Exactly 3:02, the clock shows and the train leaves. No, we have conditioned ourselves to such precision and such discipline. We find it very difficult to cope with nature. How? He says, nature teaches the humans that imprecision and imperfection are essential for anything to be good. I love these words. Imprecision and imperfection. He writes in his The Stones of Venice, nothing that lives is or can be rigidly perfect. He talks about this foxglove, this blooming plant, or the blossom. It has 3 parts. That is, part of it is decaying and part nascent, that is, in a bud form. A third part bad, it has already decayed, it has withered. Then a third part past, it's dead. Then a third part in full bloom. And this is the type of the life in this world. See, now we have in our midst people, who have become very, very old and they are not active people. Then there are youngsters. Then there are people who are dead and gone. This is the world, which he calls the foxglove principle. So when we approach nature, never ever approach nature with your human mind, which looks for precision or perfection. Imprecision and imperfection are part of nature. Right. So now some of these principles will help us to understand eco-critical thinking. Another important person is Arnaise. He uses the term eco-sophy. And he uses this term eco-sophy to distinguish it from the science of ecology. It is a neologism, no doubt. It's formed by contracting the phrase ecological philosophy. So it's a blended word. Okay. So eco-sophy refers to a philosophy with ecocentric or biocentric underpinnings. Eco-sophy encompasses 3 research foci, or what we call focus. Plural form is foci. One is wild nature, society, and interrelation of society and nature. Now, mark these words, nature as wild. We'll see more about rewilding today. Instead of reforestation, people talk about rewilding. I'll tell you more about it towards the end of my talk. Arnaise defines ecosophy As a philosophy of ecological harmony, now we are talking about balance of life, that is harmony or equilibrium. He adds one more word, sustainability. And today we talk of every moment we talk about sustainable development and resource managerialism. We use words like conservation or preservation or resource managerialism or sustainable development or simply recycling. See, all these things have to become part of our human thinking. Now, this is one form of philosophy. As humans, we have developed our rationality, our rational thinking, and we have developed an ethical thinking. So he says we have to develop an eco philosophy thinking, and this thinking should encompass all this. Okay. Now, there is this person, Barry Commoner. And I'm just telling about those people who have given some theory or other. Now, all these theories are not cogent, they are independent of one another. But the common thing is, the common thread that runs through all this is our reverence to life, reverence to nature, and our what we call an ecological frame of mind. In his work, The Closing Circle, he discusses the rapid growth of industrialism and technology and the persistent effect on all forms of life. He suggests that the negative effects can be reduced by sensitizing, informing, and educating ourselves of our connection to the natural world. He doesn't say, right, you go and educate others. Fine, first you educate yourself. Now, Commoners summarizes, that is Barry Commoner, he summarizes the basics of ecology as everything is connected to everything else. See, we talk about the World Wide Web on the net, but there is another World Wide Web on the ground, on this world, which include our land, our sea, our mountains, the entire being, which we call our planet Earth. Here, everything is connected to everything else. Now, look at the second one. Everything has to go somewhere. There is no such place as away. That is, we keep moving. We are mobile. And see, there is a beautiful poem by Robert Frost, where in that poem, this beautiful line occurs. Home is where you have to go and they have to take you in. Beautiful lines, Robert Frost. I think I have forgotten the title of the poem. Home is where you have to go and they have to take you in. Humans have their own home. The birds have their own nest. The lions have their own dens. The fox have their own lairs. And even the ants have their own homes. Right? So everything has to go somewhere. Living beings, even non-living things, they have to go somewhere. There is no such place as away. See? Everything happens within this world. It is not outside this world such a thing happens. And everything is always changing. Today, I am older than yesterday. Perhaps I have lost a few strands of hair also today. I do not know. But everything is always changing. My cells are gray and they are aging. My body is aging. So everything is always changing. So today, we have come to another day, even in the season. So we are now moving towards the next season, autumn, in the northern hemisphere. Every day you would see a change. Then there is no such thing as a free lunch. What does he mean? We are all condemned to labor. Animals have to labor, birds have to labor, and in order to find your food, you have to labor, and there is nothing called a free lunch. Everything has limits. Okay, now when you say Everything, when he says everything has limits, that I don't, it is self-explanatory. I don't have to labor much to explain that. So, Commoner's law of ecology, it forms the basis for studying and understanding relationships and interdependencies between communities and the ecosystem. So, we'll move on to that. Very often you hear these terms, deep ecology and shallow ecology. Now, what do we mean by that? Arnes, in his seminal paper, The Shallow and the Deep, a long-range ecological movement, published in 1973, he calls the shallow ecology as nothing but fight against pollution and resource depletion. See, you talk about suspended particulate matter, a city like Delhi, or inner cities in India like Hyderabad, Bhopal, or Indore, or Jaipur, or here Tamil Nadu, Coimbatore, or a city like Trichy, which are far away from the oceans, right? We talk about the suspended particulate matter, the SPM level, or pollution, or if you live in the center of city, and how the decibel level, right, because of honking or using the air horns, how the decibel level increases even beyond 120 decibels. So air pollution, noise pollution, or water pollution. And it talks about that is shallow ecology. And of course, its goal is a sustainable development. Whereas deep ecology, it explores the fundamental presuppositions of our values and our behavior toward the environment. So, deep ecology talks about ecosophy. Now, how we look at nature and the values that we have, see, and how we treat nature. Do we treat nature with respect? Of course, we have named all our gods are nature gods. But now, do we give it the same respect? Of course, we offer our worship and everything, but does it translate into everyday practice? We have to ask ourselves that question. Arnes, he advocates reduction in population, abandonment of economic growth, that is, say, economic growth for the sake of growth. Say, how long it will go on? Last year it is 6.8%. Now, this year it is 8.2%. Say, now, someone says, growth for the sake of growth is the philosophy of a cancer cell. A cancer cell keeps on multiplying. Now, if our economy is to multiply like this, produce more and more and more and wealth, it has a cancerous effect on our economy. Right. Then, living in self-reliant communities. Say today, this word self-reliance has been made very popular by our Prime Minister. Right? Self-reliance, self-dependency, without relying on others, without relying on outsiders. Maybe in economics, it is simply called autarky, where we don't expect foreign investment, we don't expect foreign help, where we help ourselves. But it's much more. Self-reliant communities, even in times of pandemic like this or endemic like this, we have to depend on our own resources, our own knowledge resources, and our own infrastructure. We need to develop such thing. Now, here self-reliant communities, according to Arnes, is without affecting the environment, without polluting the environment, we have to develop. This is almost similar to what Thoreau says. Now, Thoreau, in his Walden, talks about self-reliance. You need to lead a Spartan life. You need to grow your own vegetables. You need to, take care of your own food. Self-reliant communities. Then, of course, conservation of biotic diversity, and above all, touching the earth lightly as normative principles of deep ecology. So, now look at this. Another person, his name is Aldo Leopold. He talks about conservation of ecosystem. say, this principle of conservancy, very important. Now, we have created a reservation for animals. For tiger population in India has grown, we say. The elephant population has multiplied, we claim. Right? This is because of all our conservation ethics. And we are called to conserve our natural flora and fauna. We have to protect our biome from invasive species. We have to be very careful. We know how these invasive species from outside our country, outside our region, they have invaded our landscape and they have wreaked havoc. We know how eucalyptus was planted. You know about the Chipko movement in India. When eucalyptus trees were planted, they were called and cash crops were brought in. How it destroyed the native crops, how it destroyed the native trees. So he talks about the conservation of ecosystem. And to maintain forests, for example, to maintain forest ecosystems, the primary goal is to restore and maintain their health, and the commodity extraction is only an ancillary goal. And he articulated the idea of land health. That is, we have to recognize the capacity for self-renewal in the biota. In recent times, the ozone layer has healed because we have stopped using chlorofluorocarbons. We have minimized the use of chlorofluorocarbons, and all those holes in the ozone layer, which is O3, which is just 2 millimeters thick, it has healed. Right, now we have been protected by this ozone layer from ultraviolet radiation. So it is the ecosystem health is very important, and we have to recognize this fact, that is, the biota is capable of self-renewal. So how can that be done? Although Leopold says we have to develop something called land ethic. Now, this land ethic, it preserves the integrity, stability, and beauty of the biotic community. So, if we develop, that is, the Homo sapiens, if we develop land ethic, we will not pollute our land like this. See, coal-fired or coal-fuel national thermal plants we have, and how much of coal we burn to generate electricity. Instead, we have to look for clean energy. I don't have to say much about clean energy. You know about the use of wind energy. You know about the use of solar energy. So now, if we go on a large scale use of such clean energy, when we convert what we call do-it-yourself talent in your backyard into state-of-the-art technology, that is our achievement. You and I can create solar panels. Now, a simple solar panels, and we can generate electricity. But we have to even move ahead and develop them into state-of-the-art technology, and thereby we can save our land. So it advocates an ethical relationship with the land, an ethical relationship with the land based on love, respect, and admiration for land, and high regard for its value. We should appreciate our government and the Supreme Court, which made it mandatory for all of us to teach environmental studies in our college, so that our students can understand, and they can understand where we live, how we live, and what our responsibility is as citizens of this country and as citizens of this world. So now I will stop with this. That is the whole concept of biodiversity hotspot. Now, very often we hear this term biodiversity hotspot, and we do not know what it is. So this term biodiversity hotspot was first used by Dr. Norman Myers a wildlife photographer, and biodiversity hotspot specifically refers to 34 specific areas around the world. And these areas have lost at least 70% of their original habitat, which includes our Western Ghats, the Western Ghats, which separates Kerala and Tamil Nadu. Right? This is also a biodiversity hotspot. And according to the study, 70% of their original habitat we are trying to rescue, right? Many of the flora and fauna that belong to this place. The biodiversity hotspots have been adopted by Conservation International as a major focus for the global conservation efforts. Now, how do we solve this? We have technology. We cannot say no to technology completely. We cannot withdraw from technology. I like this concept by E.F. Schumacher. He calls that Schumacher principle of the disappearing middle. It refers to the way how a technology displaces its immediate predecessor. See, I'll give you this example, perhaps you can understand. We used to have these floppy disks in computer. Then came the floppy disks disappeared. In its place came compact disks. Then the compact disk disappeared. We have what we call this MP3, MP4, or this modern day technology. One technology dislocates another technology or deterritorializes one and implants itself in its place. So the new state of the art technology could be very expensive and sophisticated. So what he suggests is that is small is beautiful. So he has developed an organization called Intermediate Technology Development Group. So now intermediate technology, to achieve that, okay, we all have to develop what we call eco-monasticism, where we can say no to mega machines. And we have to liberate ourselves from the use of mega machines. And we have to create zones, liberated zones, right? From which ecological, cultural, and spiritual renewal or change can occur, so that we all become self-sufficient communes. So now that is the idea. When we become self-sufficient communes, we can relate ourselves with one another. We can see the other person's point of view, and we can create a society, a great society, right, in the times to come. Say, in 2050, recently, the Time magazine, which carried lots of interesting articles, and in which, right, it says how we have to look for renewable energy and how we have to move away from fossil fuel and how we have to establish certain healthy practices. For instance, today, in order to, I'll give you a simple example. There is a process called fracking. People are trying to extract what we call shale gas. Shale gas is trapped between the different layers on the ground. In order to extract this shale gas, you have to pump in a lot of fresh water. There is a huge demand for fresh water in this world, but we are wasting fresh water to extract shale gas. The process is called fracking. We have to say no to these practices. Now today, all our lives are interrelated, and we have to redefine our places in the world and only literature can help us. So literature can help us to spread the message. Of course, your social media and other things. Say, I was reading this Malayalam novel, uh, which is available in translation in Tamil. The title of the work is Yenda Magaje. Right, this is about endosulfan problem in Kerala. Endosulfan, how it wreaked havoc in the lives of people. You become aware of, acutely aware of the suffering of your fellow human beings. So now literature becomes a tool. It has an instrumental obligation. Literature has an instrumental obligation. The obligation is towards human beings, towards nature. Obligation, let me repeat, is towards human beings and towards nature. Now, what is this obligation? That is to forge or to bridge the relationship between culture and nature. And as humans, we have to create what we call a form of hylozoism. Hylozoism, that is reverence to life, reverence towards nature, and complete empathy with nature, and that is the ultimate goal of our eco-critical thinking. And why we call it eco-critical thinking? Because we criticize the current state of affairs. Right, go and read our EIA, Environment Impact Assessment 2020, and find out, the things that are good for our country. Whatever is good for India is good for the world, because whatever happens at the local level, it is going to impact people at the global level. Now, with that, I stop recording. Thank you for your patient listening.